Greetings, everyone. I'm Audrey Bilger, and it is my great honor to serve as president of Reed College. I'm delighted to be here and to extend welcomes all around to this event that ushers in the new school year. Welcome to our extraordinary faculty, to those who have been here many years, and to those who have just arrived. Welcome to our talented and committed staff, whose excellent work helps to make all of this possible. Welcome, returning students. I look forward to spending more time with you all. Most especially today, on behalf of the entire Reed community, I am pleased to welcome our new students and your friends and family members. Let's give them a big round. We're so glad you're here, and we're here for you as you begin this exciting time of your lives. I feel a kinship with those who are new here. You come from near and far. You each bring your own set of expectations, wishes, hopes, and dreams. You saw something in Reed, and Reed saw something in you that led us to this moment. For my part, I was drawn to Reed because of what Reed stands for. Since its founding over 100 years ago, this has been a college that values academic excellence, freedom of inquiry, and participatory democracy. I know that many of you share those values and have signed on for an immersive experience that will fully engage and inspire you. Having been at multiple liberal arts colleges over the past 27 years, I know that Reed is distinctive and special. At Reed, we learn together in conferences and labs, inside and outside the classroom. We believe in personal connections and a shared spirit of curiosity. As you make your way through your early days at Reed, I know you'll find much to love and much that challenges you. My hope is that you can feel joy on a regular basis, and that when you feel the most challenged, you can look around and know that you're not in this alone. Something I've been inspired by already is the way we practice democracy in our forms of address. For the first time in my professional life, students will call me Audrey. Depending on where you come from and what your background is, this may seem like a big or small matter. It is a matter of culture, though, and at every other institution where I've worked, I went by my last name with some honorific attached. At Oberlin and Claremont McKenna, for 24 years, I was Professor Bilger. While some teachers let students call them by their first name, that was exceptional, and I found, as a woman particularly, and particularly when I was younger, that there was a price to pay for relinquishing that formality. At Pomona, I was Dean Bilger. I got used to those names, and they subtly affected my sense of identity. As a first-gen college student, I remember feeling a particular pride in being Dr. Bilger, and the professor and dean titles were nice embellishments. Here at Reed, we go by first names. For some of you, this may take some getting used to. What surprises me is that I already love it. I love what this says about our community. I love how first names foster an immediate connection. It's a simple part of our culture, to be sure, but one that will grow on you, I promise. Maybe you come from schools or cultures where calling teachers, deans, and presidents by their first names would be unthinkable. I know how that can feel. I had trouble calling my former professors by their first names even after I had my PhD and was a faculty member myself. I hope you feel liberated to use first names here, and I want us all to be mindful of how liberating that can be. I frequently quote the educational theorist Paulo Freire's statement that education is the practice of freedom. That phrase seems particularly relevant here at Reed. Reedies are critical thinkers, curious inquisitors, and fierce learners. The world needs more Reedies. It will be wonderful. I think, yeah, it's true. The world does need more Reedies. It will be wonderful getting to know Reed with you all. Welcome, and best wishes for this amazing new year and beyond.
Good morning. My name is Miljan Truelove, and I serve as the Vice President and Dean of Admission and Financial Aid, and I am really glad you're all here. So I began writing my comments to you about 2 months ago, and that was largely inspired by the birth of my first child, my son Anderson. Thank you. And I've been really reflective, in particular reflective on all the conversations I've had with you parents when I said things like, I understand, and I get it, because I didn't get it, and you knew I didn't get it, and you knew I thought I got it when I didn't get it. I get it. So I'm going to begin working into my speeches as a parent, because that will give it much more credibility. And then the next step is as a parent of a teenager. That's one thing I can't say yet. But the interesting thing about my experience of the birth of my son, he was late, and he, on May 1st, when you were making decisions about what school you would attend, I was walking the hallways of the hospital waiting for Anderson to arrive. And he arrived on May 2nd, and that's really what my wife wanted, because karma. And she really didn't want me to hold that over my head. But as a result, some of the things I really share with you today are a result of me thinking about what it's like to bring a child into this world and also to give them up to a community and what that means for them. It's never too early to start. And one of you started particularly early. One of the students in the audience actually first engaged Reed that we know of way back in 2015. October 8th, it was a Thursday, and one of our admission counselors visited your high school, and you went down and you attended that visit. So that student is here today. I don't know why they didn't apply early decision. But the student from Tennessee, I just want to give them a hand. Let's applaud. Their foresight. And there's 393 of you. There are about 72 of you who may have come to Reed sometime around your senior year. So that's okay. We all come late to good things. There are 393 of you. You hail from 10 different countries. You hail from 42 states. And out of curiosity, California is the largest, most represented state here. Which is great, but it is a big state. Washington after that, and then Oregon. And what's interesting is Reedies travel furthest to come to Reed than any other school. So after those top 3 states, Illinois, New York, Texas, Massachusetts, Colorado, and Minnesota. That Minnesota, that admission counselor must be great. So the one thing that people always wonder about that I don't usually share is the most common name in the class, because it just behooves us to talk about things that are more important, Alexander. And the one thing I really want to share with you is probably the best advice I could give any one of you. Many of you sit here and you look at your classmates and you're starting school for the first time. You're really excited to jump into this group of friends, and this question comes up inevitably, and it's, will I succeed? And I'm going to share with you which might be the most important advice you'll hear in your 4 years here. Get over it. Seriously. If you were here, you're meant to be here. If you are here, you have the ability to succeed. We've done this admission things for decades. You're gonna do great. Am I right, faculty? You're really gonna do quite well. One of the interesting parts about our admission process this year, and this is something we do every year, is have a discussion about community, but we codified it in a very important way. And so one of the things that we asked ourselves as we read and evaluated your applications in committee and during the application process was not only if you'd be a good community member, but if you were someone who built community, someone who created community. I'm really happy to say that this is the class that has the highest average community rating in the history of the college. It's easy. You're the only class that we rated it so far, but it's still quite impressive. Still quite impressive. But one of the things we ask is this a group of students who are going to build community, who are going to work to make systemic change? In my 23 years of admission experience, Reed is a place that does this evaluation process differently. We focus on you in terms of how you will innovate, how you think about your place in the world, how you illustrate a willingness to change, how you illustrate a willingness to change your mind with more information, how you bring folks to cooperation. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples, and this really exemplifies, I think, all of you in terms of your great strength that you bring our community this year. One of you is an editor. In addition to being an editor, a track and field captain, you're president of an organization called the Cookie Exchange Club. And the goal of this club is for you to exchange cookies and for you to bond, and for your friends to bond friendship through this activity. But in addition to that, you sit on a board that works to get young girls into the film industry, a population that is currently underrepresented, particularly in leadership positions. And your admission counselor said of their meeting with you after their interview, I was reminded of our former student body president from several years ago. I can see the student taking on similar leadership positions. This is someone who would be exceptional at collaborating with both faculty and students while simultaneously gaining the trust and support of the student body. None of you gained the moniker of Papa Bear, primarily because you were an individual who showed so much leadership within your debate team that you grew the team from 12 students to 70 students. Your recommender said, with more than 30 years of classroom experience, that they were the most anxious about completing your recommendation because they had to get it right. And to illustrate how you formed community within your debate club, despite being deaf, was an incredible testament to your resilience, and the fact that you brought others to that debate club really talked to your ability to have others participate in a common goal. Another one of you has a deep love for music and philosophy. During an orchestral performance, your conductor joked with the audience and said, "Get up and dance." And these words struck you so much that the next evening after your jazz practice, you and a few of your buddies went down to Central Square and began playing impromptu. And maybe it was the sleeveless guy in the Buffalo Wild Wings shirt that started dancing. But by the end, he asked that you kick a funky beat, and you did, and the dance concert went on for what seemed like hours. You create community within systems that exist, outside of systems that exist, in organizations that you're part of. This student said, in particular, music is not the only way for people to connect in this manner. Though it doesn't usually involve dancing or shouting, A lively class discussion can lead people to learn more deeply and become more energized about the topic, connecting with others as a result. As a learner, I don't want to be a passive audience member who expects the performer to do the work. I want to be active, questioning everything, studying deeply, contributing to the discussions, and reading beyond what is expected. So why is all of this important? Because when I start the school year, my goal and directive is very simple. We want to recruit the class that will make us better. We want to recruit the class that will bring us together. It's very simple. You have a track record of creating space for people. You have experience building bridges by using your words. Look around at the faculty, look at your fellow classmates, the Reed community. This is a community of builders. The faculty, staff, and students are here to foundationally understand, to create knowledge that isn't yet known. You are here because you're meant to be here. Welcome to Reed, Reedies.
Hello. I'm going to take a moment to adjust this microphone. I'm going to unfurl this. Okay. So, getting ready. My name is Otis Paxton Lloyd Burchett, but that is 3 names too many, so you are more than welcome to call me Pax. To the loved ones of the soon-to-be Reedies, hello, and to the soon-to-be Reedies or Reedies, welcome. My job here is to welcome you, so welcome. You're in the club now. You are a Reedie for a little while, maybe 1 semester, maybe as many as 8. You're with us, and we're together. While you're here, you'll hear a lot about Love Reed. You'll get a little pin, it'll be on your hat when you graduate, it'll be on your laurels when you thesis. But that's hard to love Reed. Sometimes it's hard because of the things that are going on inside of your head. Sometimes it's hard because of the things going on inside of the classroom. And frequently, it's hard because of the things external to you. The things that brought some of you here with ease were the things that made it almost impossible for some of you to be here at all. Those things are pretty big differences, and they're really hard to rectify. But the way we do that here is we rectify them with love. Love of this community, and as an extension, love of each other. The faculty, the staff, those are faculty, but faculty, staff, and students, we rectify it with love. As college students, you'll have a lot of freedom. Some of you are used to this, but many of you are not. This freedom means many things. The choice, it means you have choice. The choice to love, to complain rather than to do, to leave, to procrastinate. These are your choices in college. That's one of the beauty of the limited freedoms that we have here. But they are framed by the hard edges of an institution that's designed for many of you, some of you, and against others. But there can be no supplication in the face of that challenge. Belonging, well-being, I would say, love, they're not antithetical to the academic curriculum here. They're necessary and integral parts that you will create while you're here. Those differences, making someone smile when they want to cry, smiling to a familiar face across the bridge, those will be the moments when you exemplify this institution in the love that you share for your community. There are many challenges here, and loving is one of them. So what does that mean, really, to love Reed? Because of the students that I've worked with, the faculty members who have taught me, the staff members who've supported me on some of my darkest days, I think that loving Reed means being here as your authentic and full self on your worst day, when we don't deserve it, when we haven't treated you the way you want to be treated. But you show up and you say what you have to say. Because you are here in the place of someone else. Because you deserve to be. You were chosen to be here because you deserve it. Milian said it, Audrey spoke to it a little bit, but I cannot say it enough. You deserve to be here. That seat that you're sitting in is yours. Do with it what you will. I ask that as you move through your time here, and it gets hard, and the days get longer and darker than some of you have ever known before, you try to practice love, not just of Reed, but of yourself, of this newly found freedom, and as much as you are able, of this institution, that you challenge it in ways that it's possible it hasn't been challenged in before. And know that when you fail, when the days are too dark and the nights are too long, we'll be here for you. The faces you see, we'll try to smile back, because we're all at different points on this journey of loving Reed. It's not an end game. It's not a single task. It's a process that you do every day of living here, working here, and loving here. And I adore the chance that I'll get to spend with all of you in the classroom, in Commons, and in the Great Lawn. Thank you so much.
Hi, welcome to Reed. My name is Nithya Vikrant, and I'm one of the orientation coordinators.
I'm Henri Oberholtzer, and I've also been working with Nithya as an orientation coordinator.
It is an honor to formally welcome all of you to Reed. For months now, we've been planning orientation. Our goal in planning this week was to foster an inclusive community by making events throughout orientation welcoming, fun, collaborative. We wanted to create opportunities that opened all of you up to have important conversations about what it means to be in an inclusive community by encouraging critical and constructive conversations about race, privilege, gender, and honor.
It is our hope that everyone approaches their entry into the Reed community with an open mind, practicing respect for people and their boundaries. Our advice is to take this time of transition at your own pace, reflect on how it feels to engage with the Reed community, and what being part of an inclusive community means to you.
While considering colleges, there are multiple aspects all of you considered. We don't know why you chose Reed, but this is now your community. As part of this community, we believe it is imperative to approach this institution with a critical eye of constant improvement and revision. As an Indian woman who grew up in Indonesia, something I noticed rather immediately during my short time at Reed is how few people look like me or spoke like me. So to all the folk of color, to those whose skin color and identity makes them very clear as other, speak up. Do not censor what it means to live as a person of color in the current political environment. Do not walk away from confrontation with this institution. Do not shy away from taking up space in conversations. Challenge your professors and tell them the same story from your perspective. Be loud and unapologetic. Your voice is not only important, but it is needed.
While organizing orientation this year, we took inspiration from Reed's greatest natural asset, the canyon. We chose the canyon for a number of reasons, beyond the fact that it is a gorgeous element of campus. The reason the plants and animals that call the canyon home today flourish is in no small way the result of dedicated years of work on the part of the canyon team. To maintain such a space requires love, patience, and dedication. In the same way, Reed students reflect that same dedication and love towards the school as a whole. Reedies are unafraid to push for the betterment of our campus and our community. As the canyon must be watched for species which can threaten the area's natural ecosystem, so too do Reedies keep watch on this school and community, looking for pieces that don't fit with our community ideals and addressing these flaws openly with a goal towards solutions.
In your time as a Reedie, we encourage you to constantly reflect on the spaces you occupy, the actions you take, and the impact it has on this community. We are an interdependent ecosystem where each and every one of you is equally important. And in that capacity, we hope you take it upon yourself to foster an inclusive, diverse, intellectual, and welcoming environment for everyone to flourish. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's getting really hot in here, particularly up here. There are these bright lights, and we're not allowed to wear shorts. I think, actually, I've met a lot of the people in this room at different panels and kickoffs and things, but my name is Nigel Nicholson. I'm a professor of classics and humanities, and I'm currently serving as the Dean of the Faculty here at Reed. I also want to say, I said to the students last night, I said, please smile at me when you see me. Loads of people smiled at me this morning. It was really nice. So let's keep that up. I assume they were the first years. So at Reed, we believe that a central pillar of any great undergraduate education should be professors who are highly qualified, deeply committed to undergraduate education, and well supported in that commitment. At some other institutions, you'll find professors who are highly qualified and well supported in their research and development, but who are not committed to education, or maybe not allowed to be, and spend little time with students, and certainly little time with undergraduate students. At other institutions, you'll find instructors who are deeply committed to undergraduate education, but are not well supported either in their teaching or in the research and development, or in their research and their professional development. And they struggle to remain in control of their fields, or frankly have enough time to do a good job in class. I think at Reed we're different. We attract scholars who want to teach undergraduates and are able to remain deeply versed in their fields. And we work hard and I think are well able to support them in that mission. One of our goals in having a professor speak at Convocation is to give some sense of the intellectual excitement that such great professors can generate. It can only be a partial sense. Lectures certainly have a place in our educational system. But the engagement with the materials only begins in a lecture. It doesn't end in a lecture. It moves out of the lecture into a laboratory, into a conference, into a seminar. And there the students wrestle further with the material and really interrogate it and the questions that it raises. But at least a lecture's a start. And today I'm very happy to introduce a good friend who's both a great teacher and a great economist, Professor Kimberly Clausing. Kim is the Thormund, Miller, and Walter Mintz Professor of Economics here at Reed. She received a BA from another excellent liberal arts college, Carleton, and a PhD from Harvard. She teaches courses in trade and finance, and her research focuses on the taxation of multinational firms. She's published lots of articles, has received lots of grants and awards, including two Fulbright Research Awards. And I'm not going to list all of those. There are some in the program, but I think I'm embarrassing Kim enough as it is. But she's justly recognized as an expert in her field. One of the great pleasures, frankly, is to hear her on NPR, bringing some unusual calmness and unusual clarity, and sadly, I think, some unusual command of data and history to the various questions that are at the forefront today. But I can't imagine a better expert witness. Kim is also the author of a recent book that seeks to make the case for free trade from a progressive standpoint. The book is called Open and was published this year by Harvard University Press. And if you like what you hear today, or if you want to wrestle with it some more yourself, there are plenty of copies in the bookstore. It's a great read. I definitely recommend it. But please join me in welcoming to the podium Professor Kimberly Clausing.
Thank you, Nigel, for that introduction and for the invitation to speak today. It's a real pleasure to be talking to the students and parents here on this lovely day. Students, I really hope that you treasure your time at Reed. I've now been here for 23 years, and I can tell you that it's a special place. And I hope you really view this time with enthusiasm. Now, before I talk, I should probably include a disclaimer, since aspects of this talk get a little political. So I'll just remind you all that these are the views of one professor and not necessarily that of Reed College. Okay, so as Nigel mentioned, I recently wrote a book, and the themes of that book are what I'm going to be talking about today. But before I get into that, I'd like to tell you a bit about why I wrote the book. In general, economics isn't really a book field. We mostly write dry articles, and we leave books for older, famous economists. And since I'm not famous and I'm not that old yet, I had to break with tradition to write this book. So why did I do that? Well, it all really started on Election Day 2016, and I assume most of you remember that evening. Like many of us, I was, how shall we put it, I was dismayed by the results of that election. Here, the United States had elected someone who, quite frankly, stood for the opposite of what I stood for on basically almost every single issue. And beyond those policy disagreements, I also found at the time, and I find every day since then, that the administration poses serious challenges to the very ideals that I hold dear for my country. So I struggled with how to process that event, and a lot of our students struggled, often for different reasons, but for equally important ones. And when I came into the classroom after the election, I wanted to share my older, wiser, in theory, ideas of how to cope. Now, I'll admit my first instinct was to simply drink whiskey, but I figured that wasn't the best advice to give my students. So instead, I shared my more productive ideas, beginning with the obvious, sad fact that we don't get to control election results, no matter how much we might want to. But we do get to control ourselves. We get to control how we move through the world. We get to control what work we choose to do, what we choose to find meaning in. And in times like then, and in times like today, this is an excellent time to work. For students, for all of us, to find what you care about and to work on it deeply, I think there's a lot of meaning in work. And as someone once said, evil prospers when good people do nothing. So I personally think it's important to look far beyond ourselves in our work, to work not just for our own satisfaction or for our own comfort or to make our own small environment better, but to do our bit when we can to make the larger world better. And this is something we can all do, even if in a little bit at a time. So I shared that instinct with the students. And since I'm a professor, I also told my students that it was a great time to study. And since I'm an economics professor, I told them what I think is true, which is there's never been a better time to study economics. The discipline is a powerful way to view the world and its problems. And of course, it has limits. But it enables our common sense to go further in solving social problems, and as such, it's an important part of the toolkit to make the world a somewhat better place. And I do realize you could say that about a lot of disciplines. It just happens to be that I teach this one. So then I went home and I reflected on how I would follow my own advice. And I realized that I wanted to share more broadly and beyond Reed College what I had learned from 30 years of teaching international economics. And I wanted to include my own vision for what economic policy should look like in a time like today. So that's how I came to write this book that's the theme of today's talk. But given that our setting is here at Reed College, I wanted to also say a few words about why that project was particularly fruitful here. First, it turns out that your faculty know how to teach. And that's something we do really well. It also turns out that there's a big difference between knowing something and communicating that thing. I just came from an economics conference actually a few days ago, and I was really struck by how terrible most economists are at communicating. But here at Reed, we communicate, and we communicate well. And communicating ideas is a really powerful thing to do in today's world, especially with those you disagree with. Dialogue is particularly important with those that disagree with us, even if that can be painful at times. Second, I will point out that being a scholar at Reed is sometimes difficult. For one thing, we are made to teach in fields that lie well beyond our narrow expertise. And this takes time and a lot of effort. But it turns out it also comes with a lot of advantages. Because we teach so broadly, we get a much broader sense of our discipline and a much broader sense of the world. And that breadth was really tremendously helpful in this project. And finally, I'll point out that my students were integral to this project. I had a team of 4 students that spent an entire summer on the project. And they added so much enthusiasm and joy in the way that Reed students do, loving the learning and loving the ideas. And they ultimately made the book a lot stronger. And I will tell you, students out there that are just starting at Reed, that my students and you will go on to do really truly amazing things. And one hope I have for you in your time here is that you will continue to love the simple joy of understanding as much as those students did on this project. Okay, now that you're no doubt inspired, let me say a few words about the main ideas of the book. And these will be by necessity a flimsy sketch of the arguments in the book, because I don't want to keep you here very long. It's a little warm. But feel free to follow up with me afterwards. Okay, so the book is about the challenges facing American workers at this moment in history, and why it is that I view the ideal response to those challenges to be an embrace of openness to trade and immigration, coupled with more progressive domestic policies, more progressive tax policy, and more robust public investments. So in other words, what I'd like to see is basically the exact opposite of what we've been doing in the last few years. So to set the stage for this argument, let's start by what's going on with American workers. There's some startling facts, and it turns out workers have a real reason to be discontent these days. The economy has generally done well over the past 40 years, growing enough that if you divided the national income equally, everyone could have about 70% more purchasing power than they did 40 years ago. But instead of that, equal division, we've actually seen that a lot of households have faced stagnant wage growth. And those in the bottom half of the population see almost no progress in their economic well-being over the last 4 decades. And those from the 50th to the 90th percentile see much more modest growth than they were used to in generations past. Beyond that, if you look at the economy, the share of income that's going to workers is much smaller than it used to be, and the share that's going to capital or profits is much higher than it used to be. These patterns are part of the rising economic inequality that you've no doubt heard a lot about. So a key question is what's causing that, and can we reverse whatever it was that did that? Now, one thing that happened over the last 40 years is we saw a lot more trade and immigration and foreign investment, and so we could blame that. But I would point out there are a lot of other huge changes that have affected our economy. For one thing, technology has changed in just enormous ways. As one example, when I was sitting in your seats 30 years ago as a new college student, I wrote my parents letters on paper with a pen, and I mailed them in a mailbox. Can you even imagine doing that? Probably not, right? If you're going to communicate with them, you'll text or email. And in fact, computers and the internet have transformed our lives in a lot of ways since I was in your chair. And it's also transformed our labor markets in a lot of really important ways that have sometimes hurt workers, particularly workers without a lot of education. And this is another reason for you to be happy you're sitting here today. Your Reed education will make you much harder to replace with a robot. Okay, also other things have changed. The market power of companies is larger. Labor markets have become more competitive. Unionization has fallen. There have been important changes in social norms that affect the pay of CEOs and athletes and even Beyonce. And there have also been important changes in policy, including tax policy, which is something I work on a lot. Now, these big changes are hard to disentangle, and that's a point that I make in the book, and it's important to keep that in mind. But one thing to notice right away is that every economy on the planet has been faced with extra globalization and extra technological change in these decades. But if you look at the reality on the ground in different countries, it varies quite a bit. Some see much more inequality than others. And so what that tells you right away is that institutions, policy, and social norms are all really important. So let's talk a bit about the role of trade in this whole story of what's going on with workers. Trade comes with a lot of enormous benefits that I describe in the book. But while they shouldn't be ignored, let's talk about the downside. Trade does come with disruption, and it can hurt workers. For example, a team of researchers found that extra imports from China as China entered the world trading system likely displaced 1 to 2 million American workers from their jobs. Now, that sounds bad, although I think it's important to keep in perspective and to think this through carefully. For example, one point to keep in mind is that those Chinese imports likely also created jobs in other parts of the economy due to the lower cost of intermediate goods and the fact that U.S. companies have to compete on world markets. But even if you ignore that, another point to keep in mind is that every single quarter in the U.S. economy, every 3 months, the economy loses over 6 million jobs, right? Every quarter. Compare that to the 1 to 2 million that were lost over a decade, and that seems, quite a bit larger. Now, people lose their jobs for lots of reasons, because of robots and technological change, due to domestic competition, due to changes in fads. And luckily, in most quarters, there's also a lot of job creation. 6 million jobs are created, most quarters too. And our dynamic economy is filled with creation and destruction. There are a lot of job losses and there are a lot of job gains. Now, you could argue that losing your job to a foreigner is particularly painful, I suppose. Or you could argue that we can't do anything about the march of the robots and the market power of companies, and social norms are slow to change, but what we can do is restrict trade, and maybe we should do that. And so that's the next question. Should we do that, since that's one of the things that could be hurting some American workers? And my answer to this in the book and now is no. That actually is going to create more harm than help, and in fact, trade restrictions hurt workers in 3 really important ways. First, they hurt workers as producers. For example, if you look at the tariffs and trade wars that we've started in the last couple of years, that you see that they've generated a lot of disruption. They haven't brought back the industries of the past, but they have created new shocks and new disruption. So soybean farmers in Minnesota now find that they can't sell their crops due to retaliation from China. General Motors paid over an extra $1 billion in tariffs and had to close plants in Ohio. These are real shocks that affect real American workers. Tariffs also hurt you in your role as a consumer, and it's important to note that tariffs are a tax, and they're an aggressive tax. They fall disproportionately on the poor. How do we know this? One, the poor consume a lot more of their income than the rich do, and also the poor, it turns out, consume more imports than the rich do. So tariffs are a regressive tax. In fact, if you look back to the last Gilded Age surrounding the end of the 19th and early 20th century, there was a big move to move away from tariffs as a way to finance the government and to move toward an income tax in a big battle to make that tax constitutional. And that was because it was felt reasonably so that tariffs fell disproportionately on the poor and that the income tax was a fair tax. And finally, I would point out that trade restrictions harm international relations, and peaceful relations with other countries are easy to take for granted, but they really do provide the stability required for prosperity and help address international problems like climate change. Trade helps other countries and our international aims, but it doesn't necessarily hurt us. For example, China and India have made enormous strides in their economic well-being in recent decades, and their increased openness has been part of that trend. But importantly, their gains are not our losses. This isn't a zero-sum game. At the same time that poor countries have gained income, national income in the United States and other rich countries has grown. In fact, it's grown by so much that if we shared it equally, we could all have 70% more, right? So that at least allows the potential for everyone to be better off. Our economy grows while these other economies also grow. So the zero-sum mentality of today's trade policy is, in my opinion, very dangerous. It has been dangerous in history, and it is now. So I argue that the United States should be open to trade because this is in the best interest of U.S. workers, but also the world. So let's talk next a little about immigration. This issue is actually even easier. There's no serious evidence that immigrants or immigration has been responsible for the woes of American workers that I just discussed. In the economics literature, there have been hundreds of really careful studies that are cited in the book, and the picture is really clear. Immigration is good for the country, it's good for almost every group in the country, it's good for the immigrants themselves, and there are just very few losers in that story. In the United States, immigrants are now almost 14% of the population. This counts anyone residing in the United States that was born abroad. The undocumented are less than a quarter of that number. Immigrants are far from evenly spread out. In California, which generated some of our Reed students here today, the immigrants are 27% of the population, right? Here in Oregon, it's 10%. In Montana, it's only 2%, right? Interestingly, if you look at polling data among native-born Americans and you ask, how do you feel about immigrants? Immigrants are most popular in the places where the immigrants are. The places where people are really scared of immigrants are where there are very few immigrants. But some feel we have too much immigration despite the lack of evidence that immigrants are harmful. Under the present administration, we've seen this big emphasis on a wall. That's just one part of their anti-immigrant strategy. There's also increased vetting and obstacles for legal immigration, including some of you may have noticed as foreign students that there's extra vetting for them. And reduced refugee quotas. And this says nothing of the truly horrific treatment of refugees on the border, which will be a moral stain on this country for a long time. So what are the dangers of these types of policies? I argue that there are 4 big dangers for Americans and American workers. 1, we lose talent and we lose innovation. In the past 40 years, more than 60% of Nobel Prizes in scientific fields have been won by American-based researchers, which is kind of awesome. But a minority of them were won by those born in America. A majority of our scientific Nobels are won by foreign-born researchers. Over half of our graduate students in computer science and engineering are foreign students. These are areas where the US has massive labor shortages. And many of these students typically want to stay and work in the United States, but they can't always do that. So we're in danger of losing the talent. We're also in danger of losing entrepreneurs and job creators. 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by an immigrant or an immigrant's child. Half of our billion-dollar startups were founded by immigrants. Immigrants disproportionately found small businesses in both the United States and elsewhere. They create jobs in addition to filling them. A third thing that we risk is we lose important parts of the labor force, not just the high-skilled immigrants with their graduate degrees, but also less skilled immigrants that are doing jobs that we have otherwise difficulty filling, such as agricultural work or elder care. And finally, immigrants also ease the demographic pressures that make it difficult to care for the elderly. In Japan, there are 8 retired people for every 10 workers right now. In the United States, that number is 3, and we still complain about how expensive Social Security and Medicare are. But imagine how much more difficult it would be to finance those programs if we had a greater ratio of elderly people here. One reason our ratio is so much more manageable than Japan's is we've had a history of recent immigration that has increased the size of the workforce, but also led to more fertility because recent generations of immigrants have more children than more distant generations. So in the end, I think the wise thing to do is have more, not less, immigration in the United States. Okay, so to summarize, the argument here is that American workers have a serious problem, a reason for discontent, yet trade barriers and border walls are more likely to backfire, harming the very people that they're supposedly helping. So what should we do? There are a lot of things we can do, it turns out, but the key is to go straight to the problem. We can use the tax system to make sure that gains from national income help all of those in the nation, right? By making the tax system more progressive, we can create negative tax rates for those at the bottom while asking a bit more from those at the top. I will note that our recent tax legislation in 2017 did the exact opposite, speaking of sort of opposites. We can invest in communities, we can invest in education, we can focus on building fundamental strengths of the country. All of these things would be good for American workers. And I talk about a lot of ideas in the closing chapters of the book that I don't have time to go into now. But the crux of the argument is that blaming foreigners, blaming trading partners, blaming immigrants for our problems is just a distraction. And it's more likely to harm us than help us. We can do a lot better than that. So let me conclude with just one more thought. The most prominent economic policy theme of the last few years was to put America first. That theme was used to justify tariffs, trade wars, and immigration barriers. And unfortunately, the United States is not alone in this nationalistic economic policy frame of mind. Brexit reflected a tide of nationalism and a rejection of EU trade and immigration policies. We've seen nationalist tendencies ascendant throughout the world in many other countries like Poland and Brazil and even China. At present, the economic discontent that results from inequality and wage stagnation creates a situation where those types of policies are more attractive than they should be. What we need instead are better, real economic policy solutions to those problems. We can tackle those problems seriously. We have known tools that work on those problems, and it's imperative that we do that. But the zero-sum mentality of economic nationalism is wrong. We harm ourselves when we erect barriers and walls, and we also harm others. This is dangerous, and I view this moment in history as an important time to get economic policy right. And I know we can do a lot better than we have been. So my big hope for all of us is that in 4 years, not only will you be walking across this stage, gathering your diploma on hopefully a sunny day in May of 2023, but that in the interim, we will have made a lot of progress on the issues that I've talked about today. Regardless, we all have a lot of work to do in the years ahead, so thank you and good luck to us all.
Thank you so much, Kim, for speaking today. It's wonderful to hear from you, and I do hope that people will take Kim up on her offer of answering questions. I'm sure that was meant. So thanks to everyone for being here today. I'm very excited about this, my first year at Reed College, and I'll have a special place in my heart for this class that's coming in with me and for the transfer students as well. We're all figuring this out, and it's been gorgeous. I was told there's rain, but in the 2 months that I've been here, nary a drop. I don't know. So we'll see about that. But this is it's really so special to be here with you all in this incredibly beautiful campus. For our students, you get to go and get a picture taken now. Go over toward Elliott Hall for the class photo. Just so you know, parents, this isn't the time for you to get that picture because they're going to be facing the building, so it's going to be challenging. You could do a kind of creative, artistic shot of backs. That could be cool. But really, enjoy the rest of this week. New students, parents, I'll see you later, and we'll be inviting you to leave. Thank you so very much. And one more. Just one very last thing. Please do call me Audrey. Thanks.